This program is brought to you by Dolco Media. Fixing South Sudan, ideas for the new nation. With award-winning journalist Mading Ngol.
Absolutely.
Honorable Ashwin, as you can see, the ideas of the initiatives are varied.
On July 8th, the clashes in J1 took place, which was very unfortunate.
Including country-specific ones, which
and the rebellion continue to be
Fixing South Sudan, ideas for the new nation.
Hello and welcome to Fixing South Sudan, your ideas for building the new nation. I am Awan Guol Riak. This week on Fixing South Sudan, a discussion about the role of a state in nation and state building. What policies must be deployed for South Sudan to be a country that reflects its diversity? And what kind of services should the government deliver to its people to meet its democratic role as the government of the people, for the people, and by the people? With us for the show, Honorable Awan Guol Riak, the former minister in the office of the President, Republic of South Sudan, and PhD candidate, Peking University, Beijing, China. Sir, we are happy to welcome you on Fixing South Sudan for the first time. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting me.
Welcome to Fixing South Sudan. Here we talk about nation and state building. Let's look at it like climbing a ladder. In 2011, we gained our independence, and then the government of the Republic of South Sudan was formed. And so this is where we began to take the journey to statehood, and that is a lot of hard work.
Well, I thank you once again for hosting me in this important program. Straight to our program of how to fix South Sudan with respect to state and nation building and also service delivery. I would like to state in the first place that my previous experience in the government, I do not claim to be an expert on these issues. However, I'm ready to share my opinions, observations, and views in this regard. As I do have opinions, I also respect other people's opinions in this discussion. State and nation building are two different faces of one coin. State building reflects the government actions of how to build institutions, develop systems that could deliver service to the people. Nation building, on the other hand, reflects the diversities in terms of culture, languages, and so many things. And the challenge becomes how to incorporate such differences or diversities to bring one national agenda and goals through the state institutions.
What has been our experience since 2011?
Well, before 2011, and it's one of the greatest achievements, is that our leadership under President Salva Kiir Mayardit had managed to bring all South Sudanese together with all their differences and different affiliations. They came together to vote unanimously for the independence of our country, and that is the most greatest achievement that could be remembered for centuries. This is important factor, as well as the efforts that were also exerted to establish state institutions from scratch. But with the war, made the development of such institutions very challenging. With the war, I believe it has also killed the high prospects of South Sudan economically. Instead to be a viable country, we tend today to be one of the poorest African countries. Our people are in poverty. Some left the country and took refuge in the neighboring countries. Others took shelter in United Nations protection sites.
We have made strides in the journey of nation and state building, but there are still challenges, such as the war that you have talked about, that has taken us backwards. But the journey goes forward. And what do we need to do now?
Well, as we stumbled and felt, always it's a desire of every person to wake up and move forward. We will not change the past that the crisis of 2013 that erupted into civil war, and again with the efforts that were achieved in 2015 among ourselves as South Sudanese and coming together, and again we fail. We have always to focus and move forward. And this thing needs us to stop the war, and I believe the solutions are not with the IGAD. The solutions are with us as South Sudanese. The country is ours. Stopping the war is the major factor that will allow other things to move forward. It's the way that also we can build and develop the state institutions that were created so that we can have effective service delivery and curbing also the issues of corruption and bringing the unity of South Sudanese to have their aspirations as other nations that are striving for development.
Actually, it's an interesting point that you are making. When people talk about nation building, is mostly about constructing an identity, a cohesive identity where everyone rallies around. You have been a top policymaker in South Sudan, and now you are a researcher. So when we speak about bringing South Sudanese together, we have not gone there. And when we talk about the conflict, it was seen as ethnic in some respects. And that shows that we struggle in the journey to achieve nationhood. So how, there were policies that were in place, as one nation, one people, but how do we strengthen that bond, looking back now to where you used to be?
Well, if you look at the previous experience and what I mentioned earlier as the greatest achievement, when our president worked tirelessly to bring all South Sudanese together, whether those who were in military combat as militias or other political parties. The leadership, the role of the leadership was essential. And I think many people followed our president in that path of South-South dialogue that brought our differences together, and we focused on how to achieve the independence of our country. That role is still needed, and I believed with the confidence that our president is capable, as he did it courageously in the past. He will still do his utmost best to bring all South Sudanese again together and build the country to be a prosperous nation. Regarding the wealth, we do not have any problem. And if you look at the components of the state, the elements of the state are mostly people, territory, and state authority. With the territory, I do not like to speak about it much, but when we look at these two elements, peoples and the state authority, these are the important elements that we need to focus on. And if we focus on it, I believe the system of our governments will change from the people who want to look for a shortcut always will not be possible to take the power. We have to be democratic and learn the principles of democracy. If you are defeated in opinion and the people follow that, it has to be respected. So I believe we have a long way to go, but it is not too late. We need to start to engage, and the national dialogue that has been introduced, and it was a part of the roadmap of our president in bringing the peace back to the country. I think it has to be strengthened so that we reach out, and it has to be inclusive. It shouldn't be exclusive.
Why do you think South Sudanese are backtracking on the historical achievement, which is nationhood and also to build something? What is the problem of South Sudan? Why did our people choose otherwise, to fight instead of putting hands together and develop something called nation?
Well, this goes also back when the state is supposed to deliver important services and goods, for example, security, which has been challenged by failure in disarmament properly. And also education, because when you open the horizons of people in thinking, I'm sure even if a leader comes and using ethnic elements of trying to rally people behind, it will not be accepted. So investing in people is very important. Our people, if you look at the statistics, majority of people live in rural areas, and that's where we have the high rates of illiteracy. They do not follow sometimes with the logics. So investing in people is very important, and it's role of the government to invest in its people, and that will allow them also to be productive. The state will not provide a meal on the table, but you need to develop your people. Today, if I have a work, maybe I will go in the morning, I come back in the evening. Do I have a chance to go and commit crimes? Of course not. I'll be again sleeping, tired, and I want to wake up tomorrow. I have a job to do. I have children to go to school. I have things that I want to achieve in my life. So all these are related to nation building, because when we look for the country, we got political independence. Economically, we are not, and that's where the crises are. So such gaps needs to be filled.
The states have a right, but also a responsibility. A responsibility to its people. It's not only what people can do for the state, but what the state can do for the people. And that's the point you're making, that people have expectations that the government must fulfill for that state to be a stronger state.
Definitely. The role of the state is very essential. And I think if you look into the countries today that are seen to be wealthiest and prosperous, you will not say that they achieve it without the quality of governance. Government role is essential. And if we were not to be obstructed by war, having established the state institutions could have been a chance to develop, introduce proper systems and policies that can make effectiveness of delivery of the services to the people. Among them, the security that I'm talking about, among them, the education, health, and so forth. This role is not a role that can be carried out by the citizens. Again, we have witnessed in the previous years before the war some physical capital that is a ladder also to the economic development. You can talk of Juba Road that is connecting us to East Africa to bring the goods. Therefore, everybody will be engaged. You get everything in the market. We talk of Juba Airport. We talk of hospitals that are treating our people, and so forth. So we need to give ourselves a chance. Instead of engaging in the war of fighting among ourselves, we have to be engaged in the war of economic development. That's
So
the
give the state a chance to deliver some of the needed services.
Correct.
Why don't we take a break from there?
Welcome to Dolco Media Services. We have so many services for you, such as video production, camera hiring, sound system hiring, event management, passport photo, stand-up comedy, printing, drama, music, dance, multimedia, and photography. Dolco Media Services, our culture, our pride.
Welcome back to Fixing South Sudan, your ideas for building the new nation. I am Adingor. With us is Honorable Awan Guol Riak, former minister in the office of the President, Republic of South Sudan, and PhD candidate, Peking University, Beijing, China. We talk about the role of the state in nation and state building. Those are different things. And you have just said that the state should be given a chance to deliver some services. So there has to be some atmosphere, tranquility, peace must prevail for services delivery to take place. You also talk about good governance should be in place. People should fight corruption. I really want to take our journey back to where we started. And we were a liberation movement. Liberation movement, the SPLM, captures power in Juba and began to work. So from the start, we had challenges of DDR, and that was, we had a liberation army that was swelling in ranks, and at some point it needs to be demobilized and given other tools. So is that where we went wrong? From the start, we should have arrested the proliferation of firearms, which continues to disturb it goes at the core of what the government is supposed to do, which is to achieve monopoly of violence and begin its work.
Well, I think you mentioned an important point about disarmament. With the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in 2005, we were supposed to embark immediately on disarming our civilians who were armed during the war to protect themselves and their properties. I think the agreement came with the provisions that after 6 years we will vote for independence. Going back to the history of Sudan as a one country, and also the struggle of South Sudanese, we have seen so many disagreements, so many agreements that were dishonored. And I believe in 2005, the effective disarmament didn't come to place immediately on the fear that there could be another violation of the agreement which was signed. I think that has been a point that didn't make us to take off properly. Disarmament should have been taken very seriously. Again, the international community didn't fulfill its much roles to fund the efforts of disarmament and demobilization, reintegration of ex-combatants into communities to be productive. So, and that also has affected our people, especially the cattle owners. They were raiding and they were using guns, and vengeance in other communities. They were using guns, and it has taken many lives. The challenges that I believed also were very enormous. Among them, the vast borders of South Sudan. If you look between us and Sudan, whereas Sudan itself has the civil war, the control of such borders was something impossible. So there was entry of guns from other neighboring countries. Again, if you look into Congo, It has also the same thing. There was the army struggles. And again, they were just passing without control of borders. Even Uganda, with the Lord Resistance Army, we have seen the atrocities that were committed by Lord Resistance Army in our country. And again, it was because of the lack of control of the borders, even Central Africa. So if you look basically into the surroundings of South Sudan after achieving the peace agreement, we couldn't make it really to control the borders. Some were not demarcated properly, and we had disputes with the Sudan. So all this contributed to lack of proper disarmament of our civilians, and it has affected severely.
Assume that the disarmament exercise went on effectively, would it have changed the face of South Sudan?
Of course, looking at the role of the state, as you mentioned earlier, that use of force is a monopoly of the state. There is no other communities or individuals to take law into their own hands or to decide and do whatever they want to do because they also have arms. It has been a greater factor. Even with the war that is going on, it makes it so extreme difficult to disarm our populations. And I think it's one of the greatest challenges. For me, it's one of my research actually right now as a PhD candidate. My research is about the challenges of disarmament, which is DDR in South Sudan on the path of economic development. Without this, the confidence and stability would not be realized.
You are not just a researcher, but you are someone who have been participating in the governance in the nation. From your area, you were deputy governor. And what was your practical experience with disarmament in Rumbek?
Well,
in those days?
I had a privilege to work with the governor, John Lett. May Almighty God rest his soul in peace. And I also worked with the governor, Daniel Awendit. And with Governor Daniel, I had a chance to be the chairperson of the State Disarmament Committee. And in 2008, we effectively collected the arms without resistance. And it was based on persuasion of our communities, telling them the right thing. And we collected and we displayed many arms that we collected. So practically, I participated, as you mentioned, and not just a researcher. I participated in this practice.
It was not followed with concrete actions, and people went back to their old ways.
Of course, if you see other communities that were not disarmed, there was a claim that why we were only to be disarmed. Again, there were lack of the control of the borders, and again made the flow of the arms something not to be really stopped.
Let's crystallize the issues we are talking about. Let's put them in perspective. We are talking about saving the soul of the nation. How do we build this thing called South Sudan? It's new, it's only a few years old, and it is troubled. So it's about fixing South Sudan. So if I throw that question, in the journey of nation building, even nation making, how do we fix this thing called South Sudan? Because there are many, many, many things that we have to deal with.
Well, South Sudan, like other nations in the world, the processes of the state and nation building is not a simple thing. It requires so many factors and influences, politically, culturally, socially, economically. When you look into all this, it becomes a journey that is not simple to be achieved immediately, but it has to be started and goes gradually until we resolve our issues and become
Is it
prosperous.
something you have started when you were working with President Salva in J1? You worked with him for 2 years. Were you fixing South Sudan, or were you trying to fix South Sudan?
Well, for me, being in the office of the president, it was a good chance for me to really participate at the national level of our country. And I still feel those years that I spent were very precious, and I learned a lot. And when I talk today, sitting back and observing, I know that it was a wonderful opportunity. Again, the efforts are not simple. It is easy for us to put words in just like that, but practically there are always many challenges and impediments at the same time. I believe with us coming together, believing that this is our country, and we have that tendency of forgiving one another and moving forward, I believe the rest could be achieved. We need to invest on our people, and I will mention it several times. Investment in our people is very essential. And when we invest in them, it will allow them to be responsible citizens, because traditionally we were not just moved as the way we think that this should be done this way. Like other nations, we have to take some examples. There are countries that had such experiences, had such difficulties. What can we learn from other countries and other nations of the world so that we become a prosperous nation? We have all the potentials. And with these potentials, we will not put them into practice without us having that spirit of love our nation.
Minister, you were at the center of governance together with the President of the Republic of South Sudan. Did you try or did you fix South Sudan, or was it difficult?
Well, if you go back when the war erupted, I was sworn in on Friday, and then my first job was on Saturday, and then Sunday crisis happened. We, through our leadership, President Salva Kiir behind him and his vision, I think we managed to achieve even bringing back the opposition. If we were fixing, we were not destroying the efforts of our president until there was interference of international community with the peace that was very difficult in some of the provisions. Yet, because of the love of the country, our president managed to sign it, and Dr. Riek Machar was in this country. We were doing our utmost best to see we are fixing South Sudan, and peace is a core here issue.
What do you think about where the country is today? The peace agreement is not finalizing, and you have an economy in turmoil. People are suffering a lot of hardship in South Sudan. And this makes the issues we are talking about pale in comparison to the real everyday struggle of the people. When we talk about state building, nation building, they sound so lofty, and the reality is very difficult at the grassroots. So how do we restore hope to the people?
Well, we have to keep on with efforts of peace, and dialogue should be opened. I believe the solutions are not with IGAD. Again, the role of the leadership is very important and essential because, as I mentioned earlier, that our president took a path of uniting the people of South Sudan, and that made them to vote unanimously during the days of referendum. Again, this is needed, and I believed with the role of our leadership is capable. And again, our people should know that it's not one man's show, but they have also to help. If you look recently in the issue of Kenya with the crisis, political crisis, Raila Odinga and President Kenyatta came together. I'm really hoping that our leaders, wherever they are, must come together and abandon violence. Our people suffered enough.
Is that doable?
Of course it's doable.
Under the same dispensation that started the war?
Of course it is. If you don't look who I am in sitting in the power, but if you look critically into the issues and the people, you will come out and say enough is enough.
Compromises must be made.
Of course, definitely.
South Sudan needs to be fixed.
It has to be fixed.
Thank you for coming to Fixing South Sudan.
Thank you.